Yes, technical difficulties. But if I set the if I set the slider max to 1 in the base material, then when I go to the instance, then it locks it, so I don't have to sort of guess how far to go with the slider. It just goes 0 to 1, and you can set the min and max of a slider to any number you want, depending on what you need. For example, so I'm just going to show emissive, which is something glowing, and this is ridiculous, but um, you wouldn't want a pipe to do this unless it was radioactive, I guess. But if I plug a red value into the emissive color, and this is a parameter as well, it's going to glow red. And emissive is something you can drive above 1. It goes higher than 0 to 1 because stuff glows brightly. So I'm going to introduce like math operations into the material editor, and I don't know if this is intimidating or what, but it's awesome. So you can do a multiply, and then I'm going to plug the glow color into multiply, and you can do this with a scalar or a scalar constant value or whatever, or a vector with 3. You can basically multiply anything. So right now it's defaults to multiply by 1, but what I'm going to do is add another scalar parameter, and I'm going to call it glow intensity. And I'm going to max it at 20 and min it at 0. And right now its default value is 0, so as soon as I multiply this, it's going to default to multiplying it by 0, and there's going to be no glow. And plug that in, and now the glow is gone again. But if I apply it and go back to my instance, I now have a glow color and a glow intensity. And so if I start to turn up this slider, if I go to 1, I still have a lot left because it's going to 20. So I can keep turning it up, and it actually, the color changes because of the physically based rendering in Unreal, I believe. Apparently that's how it works. But yeah, you can get actually a pretty bright tone, and if there was the sunlight here wasn't as bright, you would be able to see it a little bit better. Yeah.
Whoa.
Don't touch that pipe. Yeah, so that's another useful thing, and I'll get into more sort of operations in the material editor in a minute, but I just wanted to show that you can do that. So I'll turn that off, make it a sort of a normal pipe again. And then, yeah, I wanted to look at Substance Painter real quick. Not going to do any Substance Painter tutorials today, I think, but here's my textures, or my material for the pipe. And to export into Unreal, it's also fairly straightforward. I'm just going to export textures, and then selecting the Unreal Engine 4 packed preset. I did set up the the folder in advance, so that's all going to go where I want it to already. And I also customized in configuration. I customized the naming convention in it so that it's going to name them what I want. But other than that, it's exactly the same as what you guys will get in your thing. So I exported it and then clicked, open folder. And now I have 3 textures, and I'm going to open them up in Photoshop eventually. Here we go. So get out of here, lazy Nezumi. So the base color is the color map or diffuse map or albedo, whatever you want to call it. It's exactly what you'd expect. It's it's the same as other models. So is the normal map. Yeah, so that's nothing to talk about. But this is the packed map, which I don't know if people are doing at San Jose State really. It's kind of a games thing. I don't think you use it for production rendering as much, but I could be wrong. But basically, this is actually 3 different maps, and they're all black and white maps that are packed into the red, green, and blue channels here. So if I look at the red channel, that's an ambient occlusion map. Green is roughness. This is the roughness map. And then blue is the metallic map.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and it's really useful for games where you have limited memory or something, and instead of 3 2048 by 2048 textures. You just have one doing the work of three. And so in Unreal, which I'll show in a second, you can split these back out and use them separately. So we go back to Unreal, and I'll just go to my textures folder and drag these in. And sometimes like you have to hold it for a little bit before it sort of picks them up. But anyway, there we go. So here's our three textures. Then I'm just going to open these up and close them, save. But the packed map has a special thing you have to do, and people always forget to do this when they're starting out in Unreal, so I'm going to emphasize it. You have to open up any kind of map where it's like masks or it's packed into the red, green, and blue channels. You have to open up this and uncheck sRGB, and the reason for that is kind of complicated gamma correction stuff. But if you don't do this, your model will look too shiny, basically. So I'm unchecking it now. And now I have my three textures. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into this material, and you can drag these in one at a time or all together. So I'm just going to, hey, there we go. So there's the three textures, and I'm actually going to just delete everything and then plug these in one by one. So each texture sample has 5 outputs, and this is RGB. This is your color. This is the individual red, green, and blue channels of the texture, and then this is the alpha. So right now I just care about the color. So I'm going to plug that into base color and apply it. Also, one thing that's good to know is if you don't give an input to one of these, it's going to use the default value. So the default of metallic is 0, not metallic. Default of roughness is like 0.5, so sort of medium rough. And then normal is, non-normal. And then emissive obviously is 0. So I've now put the color map on there. It's looking better already. And then, so here's our packed map. Again, ambient occlusion is in the roughness, or in the red channel. So I'm going to plug that in to ambient occlusion. And then roughness is in green, so I'll plug that in there. And metallic is blue. So I plug that in. And once I apply that, you'll see we now have metallic, specular, roughness, whatever, working. And then plugging in the normal map is very straightforward. So now I have my textured model. It always takes a second to compile these. And the more materials you have, the longer you'll wait for those compiles. But really, it doesn't take longer than a minute or so in general. At work, we have like 60,000 materials, so sometimes it takes half an hour. But
oh my!
Nobody watching this should have to worry about that anytime soon, I assume. And if you do, congratulations on your new
on your new job,
on your new gig. But anyway, so if I've now taken all those parameters out of the base material, so if I go back to these instances I made earlier, the parameters are now gone, which is very sad. Alexa, play Despacito. But this is a very hip broadcast. But what I want to do now is actually start working with these textures. So there's a lot of stuff you can do here. Like if I make another multiply node, and by the way, that was holding M and click. There's hotkeys for like a million things in the material editor. So if I multiply the base color, it's now multiplying by nothing. But if I make a scalar parameter, S click, oops, see.
Extra S's.
Yeah, I'll just say base color brightness, I guess. And then I'll max that at 1, default to 1 so that it's normal. And apply that, and this is not very good. This is not a good parameter, but I'm just going to show it off anyway. So now I can change the brightness of the base color. One thing you can do in Unreal is if you go to this menu here, you can go to unlit mode and just see the color maps of everything. So you can see a little more easily that that's what I'm doing here. But this is ugly and bad, so I'm going to take it out. actually going to use another kind of node here. If you type in blend, also I'm right clicking. I don't know if I said that. I'm right clicking to get this menu of basically everything you can do here. If I type in blend, you actually get a bunch of blends that are a lot like the Photoshop or Substance blends or whatever. So I'm going to use a blend overlay and plug the color map into base, and then blend needs an input. So I'm going to make another vector parameter and just call it tint. And as you guys probably know, an overlay basically lightens the image if the top layer is over 50% gray, and it darkens it if it's under. So I'm going to set this to exactly 0.5, so that if you blend in this tint, by default, it's actually not going to do anything. It will look exactly the same. I think that's a good default value.
And then you can adjust it if you want to.
Right, exactly. So if I go back into the instance, I have this tint value and it's gray, but I can be like, I'm going to make this pipe more red. Let me turn this back to lit. And now I can tint it without completely losing the base color.
Oh,
so that's
that's cool.
It's a useful function. And one thing I like to do is, so this is always a really hard node for me to explain, but it's called linear interpolate. And I think I'm going to explain it actually by, I'm actually going to delete this and stop using the base color for a second. And now I'm going to take the ambient occlusion and plug that into the base color for 1 second. And now we will see it's using the AO. Actually, that's not displaying correctly. If you want to get completely just the color maps, you have to go down here to buffer visualization. You can actually do metallic, whatever, but I'm just going to go to base color. So you can see that the now using as the base color the ambient occlusion. Anyway, linear interpolate, or LERP, is basically you put an input into A and you put an input into B, and then the alpha is what decides what of each it's going to use. So if I put, let's say, I put red into A, I'm going to put, I'm going to put blue into B, just arbitrary, but by default the alpha is 0.5, so I should get purple in the color, and I do.
Shiny purple.
Here we go. Yeah, shiny purple pipe. That's pretty beautiful. I'm going to make a scalar parameter, and I'll call it color lerp alpha, I guess, and then set the slider max to 1, set the default to 0.5 like it is right now, and I will plug this parameter into the alpha. Wait for it to compile, and now I have this parameter, and I can lerp to red and lerp to blue and somewhere in the middle. So that's cool. But what's also cool is that it doesn't have to be just a number. You can plug a texture in here. So I'm actually going to take that same ambient occlusion and plug that into the alpha, and now it's going to use it like a mask. It's going to blend between those two things based on the texture, where black is 0 and white is 1. So if I go back to the color map, you can see that's our base color now, which is awesome. I don't know that it's very practical, but there it is.
Like for a dirt map, maybe?
Yeah, that's definitely a really good use.
Like a fast dirt map?
Right, exactly. One thing you could do is if you had like a tiling grunge texture, you could take the ambient occlusion map and then overlay it with the grunge texture, and then use that blended thing to be a dirt map and plug that in here. So you can basically, like, there's no rules. You can make graphs that go out to here, and release like tile textures, blend them together. Like, that's the real power of Unreal. Like, if I actually go to this concrete material this is going to be terrifying to somebody who's never used Unreal before, but like this is the concrete material right now, and it's got blends between like cracked and uncracked versions of the textures. It's got sort of these puddles that you can blend in with vertex coloring, and the puddles, it's hard to see, but they're actually like animated, and they've got sort of like a water rippling effect going across them. So there's so much you can do with this material editor, and to start getting the basics down, it's pretty intuitive, which is why I'd love to see more students sort of getting familiar with Unreal. Like this node stuff can get a little bit messy looking, but it's really straightforward once you get the hang of like the basic vocabulary. So I want to show one more thing you can do, which is if I go back to Substance, I made this other layer, which is just a mask.
Huh.
And so I'm just going to export that out using the color map preset. And there it is. I'll just rename it to mask, I guess. And go back to my, I have too much stuff open. All right. Go back to my textures folder and drag in the mask. And again, since this is a mask and not an actual color thing, I'm going to turn off sRGB, save that. And now I'm going to open up that material again and draw this mask in here. And now, what if I plug this mask? I can actually, so since it's a black and white image, I can use this white node and connect that here, but I could also just grab one of the red, green, and blue values. It doesn't really matter. For this, I guess I'll just use the white one, or the full color. So now I use that mask, and as you can see, it's masking out just the sort of the crank handle.
Huh.
And this isn't anything, but I'll show you what is useful. If I delete these two, I'm going to plug the base color texture into A, and then since black is A and white is B, I'm going to get a vector parameter. Just call it handle color, and then let's say it's red, and plug that into B. And now I have a handle that is red with that controlled by that mask, and also if I go to the instance, I can change the color of the handle.
That's really cool.
Yeah, this can be super useful for, like, maybe you're making a racing game and you want to change the color of a car or something. Like, you can change the color of just parts of a material without having to, doing what I was doing before, which is just tint the entire texture, which isn't as useful. And being able to just sort of target mask stuff is really nice. In fact, you can even go further and like make layers. So if you wanted to, change the paint color of something, but then layer, brown dirt over it, you could, with an alpha, you could also do that in the material. So this doesn't have to be at the top layer. You can change the color sort of midway through the stack of stuff you're doing. And that gets much more complicated. But so one thing I don't like right now is that the pipe is metallic and the handle still looks metallic, because if I go to the buffer, it's still showing as metallic in the map. So what I would do is, this is why this stuff gets a little bit ugly looking. It's just because there's so many wires, and I'm hoping that they'll make it cleaner to look at. Like maybe you could fade out these wires. There may be ways to do that in newer versions. I'm not sure, but I'm going to make another lerp, L click, if anyone at home is keeping score.
Yeah.
So I'm going to plug this same mask into the alpha here, and then I'm going to get the metallic value, plug that into A, and then B I want to be non-metallic. So I could make a constant value of 0 and plug that into B. With the lerp node, you can set a constant value in the node. Like if I click on it, I can go over to details and just set this to 0. But I like to just put a constant value in there, because if you've opened up this material or somebody else opens up the material, it's a lot easier to see, like just looking at it at a glance, like, oh, that's set to 0. Whereas if it's set in here,
it's harder to see.
Yeah, you're like, oh, it shows it here, but it's like you can't really notice it. So it's like I'm gonna just put a constant value in there. So now I'm gonna take this blended version and plug that into the metallic instead of the, what did I do? What did I do? Okay, so I think what happened here is, since this is just one channel, it doesn't like that I'm putting the full color in here. So I'm just going to grab the red and plug that in instead of the full thing, and that should fix that.
Oh, is just because it's like it doesn't want?
Yeah, the lerp is like, it only wants to blend like things of the same type, I guess. So it's like I'm not blending a full color image with a black and white image. That's crazy talk. I think that's the idea. So now I have, if I apply that, now the handle is non-metallic and actually looks like paint, which is much better. And what I can go on and do beyond that is do the same thing with the roughness. This is starting to get really messy, but I don't care. So I'll get the roughness and plug that in. Whoops. Plug that into the A value, and then I'll just make a scalar parameter and call it like handle paint roughness. Once again, set the slider to max, set the default to like 0.5, and then I'll plug that in to the B based on this same mask, apply that, and save. And now if I go back to this instance, it's not there. I've done something wrong. Let me go back and look here. Oh, I didn't plug it into the roughness, so I got to take the out of here, plug that into roughness. And yeah, once again, like this is where the wires start to get a little messy, and you can move stuff around to try and keep things cleaner than this. And actually, one thing that's really nice that they added recently is you can type a reroute node, and you can sort of make these little nodes that help you control the wires a little bit better.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so that's really nice to have. It used to be that they didn't have these, and it was just sort of take what you get. But now you can, if you want to make it clean, especially if you're going to give this material to somebody else to work on, you can do stuff like that and sort of clean things up. But even with reroute nodes, it can be hard to keep everything perfectly clean, just because you have stuff like this where these are plugged into. Like the default from Substance is ambient occlusion, roughness, and then metallic. But then over here, they do metallic, roughness, and ambient occlusion. So sort of you're basically forced to like cross over these wires and stuff, unfortunately, unless you change your export settings in Substance, because you can pack those maps into any order of channels, color channels in your image that you like. But anyway, back to what I was doing. Yeah, so now I have a scalar parameter for the paint roughness, and I can make it really rough or really shiny, and it will change discretely from the rest of the material. So I'm just adjusting the paint on the handle here.
That's cool.
Based on that mask. So this gets, as I showed with the concrete, like you can do a ton of stuff here. Like these puddles are being lerped onto the concrete based on a mask, and it's changing like the color. It's darkening it slightly to simulate the liquid, and then it's also changing the roughness all the way to 0 to get that water
Shine.
Surface. And it's those ripples are because I'm lerping like sort of a wobbly normal that's panning across the surface into the flat normal of the rest of the texture. So like you can do anything and everything in the material editor pretty much. And that's I think the stuff that I wanted to make sure I covered, but I could do whatever else.
Well, that was really cool because it's just like it seems very like substance designery with the nodes and everything.
Yeah, it is kind of, and I think I wouldn't have been able to learn Substance Designer as easily if I hadn't spent a bunch of time in the material editor and Unreal, because I learned Unreal first. And yeah, like I think the main difference with Substance Designer is that you don't get a lot of like Substance Designer has a lot of expensive nodes that do like a blur, and you don't get like those sort of heavy duty image effects that you could get in Substance Designer, just because this has to run in real time. But yeah, you get all those same kind of blending and masks and all the stuff that you do in Substance Designer, and a lot of it works the same way. Not used to having a one screen to work on. Unreal's very two screen sort of focused, but let's see. Yeah, so what I was thinking was actually I could show a little bit of lighting stuff.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Useful. Because yeah, I've been sort of advocating for more Unreal at San Jose State, and I think that, you know, seeing how nice you can make stuff look in Unreal, and in a really, you know, you can do it really fast, which is nice, compared to, you know, at least when I was in school we were using Mental Ray, and you know, everyone came out with these, you know, sort of crappy renders just because, you know, you'd spend 5 hours working on your render and most of those hours would be spent waiting for it to render, you know, and if it looks bad you have to wait like a long time to find out that it looks bad, and then change something to see if that fixes it, wait another long time to see if it looks better, and it doesn't, you have to do another change, and like that's so, you know, until you get a lot of experience and you know more what to expect, that can take a really long time. And this is very quick, so I'm going to just go to the lights tab over here. Actually, what I can do is delete everything here. Now it's really dark. I'll go to unlit so I can see. But if I start the game, you can see our guy is almost invisible. It's super dark. But what I'm going to do first is throw down a directional light. That works the same as in, you know, Maya.
Oh, yeah.
And you can change the intensity of the directional light. You can change the color. In here, this is the details tab. This is a very important tab in Unreal. This is where all the details are, just like in Maya. And then up here is like the outliner. If people are going to use Unreal, I haven't really like gone over sort of the basics of the interface, but this is sort of your library of basic objects like lights, you know, cubes and stuff. Down here is the content browser, which is all the files that you imported. So like materials, meshes, textures, sort of individual things that you make, whereas these are like sort of general use, you know, stuff like lights and stuff, but this is models and materials and whatnot. It's the details tab. There's another tab here called world settings. I don't know if this is the default layout, actually. I may have changed it, but world settings is less important off the bat. You really care about details. World outliner is the same as the outliner in Maya, so I can select, you know, this floor mesh, the player start, post-process volume, which I should also delete because I didn't explain that. But I want to take out everything I didn't already explain so that it's more easy for people to follow. But anyway, so if I make like an orange directional light, and it's going to say lighting needs to be rebuilt. So I go to build, and instead of clicking this, I'm going to click on the little triangle to the right of it and click build lighting only, because if you click the build button, it's going to build like code stuff, and that takes a while, and sometimes it'll try to ask you to run other programs and stuff. So yes, just click over here, and this will take a long time or not, depending on a lot of factors. So So this looks bad, and that's because in Unreal, all the shadows are baked down onto the meshes. So if I click on this floor and go to the details panel for the floor mesh architecture block, I'm going to scroll down here until I get to this field, which is overridden light map res. So the light map resolution for this floor is 64, which means all the shadows for this entire floor piece are baked onto a 64 by 64 texture, which is pretty small. So if I turn it up to 128 and rebake, by the way, I'm getting a better shadow now just because this is a real-time dynamic shadow that it's using temporarily until we bake lighting. So you can actually, if I set the light to movable, it's going to use dynamic shadows all the time, and Unreal will now not tell me I need to bake lighting because there's no sort of stationary lights to bake. There's just this dynamic one. But generally, like, at least if you're making a game, you don't want to use movable lights all the time because they're expensive. So I'll set it back to stationary and bake again. Build, rather. And since I doubled the resolution, the shadow should look twice as good, theoretically. Nope, it still looks bad. So I'll turn it up one more time. The one thing about this is if you start turning the resolution way up on every mesh, it gets really, it starts to take a really long time to build lights. So, over 512 is getting out of control. So if this doesn't look any better, I'm just going to take it. All right, that's not perfect, but I'll take it for now. Also, pressing G, I forgot to tell this to the BFA class and I asked them for renders, which was really dumb. But pressing G hides all sort of editor stuff, whether it's icons or grid or lights. So if I press G, it's going to show it sort of how it will look in the game. G for game, I guess. So anyway, so here's my light. This doesn't look very good. It has no fill. It's like pitch black. So what I can do is I could add more lights to sort of do a manual 3-point lighting setup, which I'll show in a minute. But what I like to do actually is you can add a skylight, and what a skylight does is it sort of looks out a certain distance from your scene, and it sort of grabs all that and creates like an HDR sky image and then builds light based on that. But since everything out there is black, it looks exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is go to Visual Effects, and you have atmospheric fog. If I add that, atmospheric fog is pretty amazing. It actually like simulates light scattering and red, blue, all that stuff, which is actually more than I really want right now. So I'm going to delete that and instead use exponential height fog, which is like a more video gamey, simplistic fog, which gives me more control. So if I change the fog density or fog color, I can be like, okay, I want this fog, and this is like a very, very simple sky is what I like to use it for. It's like, I want a blue sky. Okay, there we go. So now we have sort of a blue sky for the skylight to capture, and since it's stationary, I believe we have to rebuild lighting again. And now the skylight will use this blue sky to add sort of indirect lighting. And it's still pretty dark, but it got a little bit brighter. And actually, if I click on the skylight, there's an intensity value. There it is. And if I turn that up, you can see it starts to fill in that more. And already it looks a lot nicer. That's sort of the basic lighting stuff. You have, a directional light. You can also put spotlights. You can make point lights. All that stuff is pretty straightforward.
Is point light more for like headlights of mesh or like mesh stuff where it's gonna glow?
Yeah, or like a light bulb hanging in a room, or like, yeah, point light just goes in all directions. You can change the attenuation radius, which is like how far out it affects the world. You can change the color and everything on all of these lights, of course. There's definitely a lot of things in the details panel for like every object that you'll never have to pay attention to. But yeah, the important stuff is usually near the top. So we have intensity is number one. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here. But so one last cool thing with lighting is a relatively recent thing they added in Unreal, which is light channels. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a point light. And let's say you want to like add a really cool rim light on the bottom of this pipe, but you don't want it to be blasting out this glow on the floor. You just want it on the pipe. Actually, no, I'm going to do a better example. I'll make a spotlight and turn the intensity all the way up. One thing with spotlights is if you turn the intensity to max, I find it's not actually that bright. So if you uncheck use inverse squared fall off, you'll get a dramatically brighter value, which I tend to do if I'm trying to just blast something with a spotlight. So here I go. Actually, I'll turn up the attenuation radius also so I get more. Let's say I'm trying to get this like really intense rim light, but I don't like how much it's lighting up the floor. So if I go to lighting channels, I'm actually going to uncheck. So right now everything's in channel 0, but if I take this out of channel 0, now it's in no channels, so it's not actually casting light anywhere. But if I put it in channel 1, it's now casting light into channel 1. But none of the objects are in channel 1, so they're not receiving it. But if I click the pipe, meshes can also be in lighting channels. So if I scroll down here, where is it? There it is. If I take it out of channel 0, now this is getting no light. It actually has some blue, but I think that's not lighting. That's sort of just a reflection. But anyway, put it back in channel 0. Or actually, so if I put it in channel 1, now it's going to get the channel 1 light from this spotlight. But I actually want to put it in channel 0 too, so it's getting that regular world light. And now it's getting this awesome rim light, and the rim light isn't affecting anything else in the scene. So it's like super fake. But it's really useful to use for character, stuff, or 3-point lighting setups where you want something to have a dramatic rim light, but you don't want to have the consequences of putting a huge spotlight into the scene or whatever. So this can be really useful. And if I delete that, you can do the same thing with a point light. Put it in channel 1, make this like super red. And yeah, it's not lighting up the ground or anything, it's just lighting up only the pipe. So that's a really good way to control where your light's going in Unreal. And that's most of what I got to say about lighting, at least sort of to get started out.
That's cool. I mean, it's definitely awesome to see how rim lighting and all that shit works in here.
Yeah, for sure. And like the other thing is you can use nothing but dynamic lights, especially if you're doing a render for something and you're not ever going to do a video of this scene, or if you're just taking static screenshots, like you don't really care if it's running well like you would for a video game. If I hold tilde and open the console down here, I can put stat FPS and get a frame rate counter, which is nice. But you don't really need it for a render for school or whatever. So yeah, what's nice is if you're really trying to set up a render, like you can be like, I want to change the shadow over here. I want to maybe make the directional light a different color. There's so many options here, and it's just really nice to be able to set this scene up so quickly and not have to wait for really long renders. I wanted to talk about the post-process volume. So
yeah.
Yes, Unreal has a lot of post-processing effects that you can add. It's G again. So here, to get post-processing effects, you have to go to Visual Effects and drag in a post-process volume. And basically, this will do post-processing effects anytime you're inside the box. And if you're outside the box, it won't. And that's for games where you might want to switch from one kind of post-processing to another, depending on like where you are in a level. But I'm just going to make it really big to cover everything. And now, with the post-process volume selected, if I go to the details, I get white balance settings I can adjust. There's a lot. There's like saturation. I could go desaturate the whole thing and make this entire thing black and white, or like oversaturated. Yeah, it's like there's a lot in here. Contrast. Yeah. Oh my god. Like, this is all the same stuff you get in Photoshop or whatever. And let me see, what else is like particularly interesting? You can do like a really intense chromatic aberration if you want. Make it look like Spider-Verse.
Spider-Verse?
Let me see. You can control the bloom on stuff, which is nice. Like, you can turn it up really high and make it look like a old vintage film. And then the threshold is like, how bright does it have to be before it starts blooming out. And there's a lot of other technical stuff you can add too. I don't even know how to use all this stuff, but you get the idea. Let me see. You can turn on depth of field. I don't remember all the things you have to set up for this to work, but you can do it. I won't embarrass myself by trying to remember on camera. You can adjust ambient occlusion intensity. It's set to 0.5 by default. You can turn it up or turn it all the way off. I like to turn it up a lot. You can change the AO like radius too. Also nice. And then like vignette is in here somewhere. That's what I've been looking for. There it is. Vignette intensity is set to 0.4 by default. You can turn it all the way up to 1 and get this really intense vignette, or turn it all the way off. You can turn on a grain. Actually, yeah, grain, there's no chance this will look good on a stream, but I'll do it anyway. Turn sort of like a film grain on. That's probably going to kill the video quality, but I'll turn it off again. That looks good in a static image. You get a little graininess. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do here. Like you can change the shadow. Wait. Sorry. Let me see. Yeah, there we go. So you can make the shadows more like more purple, and then make the highlights more yellow or something. That doesn't look like it did anything, to be honest, but I assume it does something. Anyway, like there's so many controls, and it takes a bit of fiddling to figure out which ones do stuff and which ones don't off the bat. But anyway, you can do pretty complex color grading in here if you want. If you prefer to do it in like Photoshop or something, you can do that too. But anyway, to take a screenshot, you can press F9 and it will just take a screenshot, which is great.
When it gets rid of all the stuff, like all the
icons and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh no, actually, no. I think if you take a screenshot with those on, they will be in the shot. So that's why I felt bad for not telling BFA.
Oh, gotcha.
you gotta press the G key. Excuse me. You gotta press the G key and get rid of those, and then take the shot. Take the shot.
Take the shot.
And then one other thing that's really cool is, again, pressing tilde. You can do something where you do high res shot. You type a high res shot, and then that will let you take one that's much bigger than your screen, which can be nice if you want print resolution. And basically, you type high res shot and then a number, and the number is the multiplier of your screen size. So if you type high-res shot 1, it's going to give you a shot that's the same size as your screen. But if I type high-res shot 8, it will probably freeze for a second. Yep. There we go. But I opened that up, and
it's massive.
It's saved me this high-res shot image, and I assume if I zoom in, they don't look amazing, but they do look better than taking a screen res shot. So you can actually get a reasonable resolution here. So that's what you can do for your portfolio or whatever. Take high res shots, and then what I like to do is take something like this and then go into Photoshop and run a sharpen on it or a little bit of stuff like that, so that it looks a little bit cleaner. Because I think Unreal tends to give slightly blurry images compared to some other renderers, so I like to sharpen it up a little bit.
Do you recommend, if you're trying to get a job in games, to do Unreal shots of your props and stuff, just so they know that it's in Unreal?
I think, yeah, absolutely. Because I think whether you're going to work somewhere that uses Unreal or not, I think one of the biggest job skills in video games is just being able to pick stuff up. Like, they might have their own game engine and their own tools, and you'll have to learn them, right? And being able to show hey, I put this in Unreal, hey, I put this in Unity, or whatever, is a really good way of saying hey, look, I know how to learn stuff. I know how to learn different game engines. And also a lot of stuff in Unreal, like roughness metallic, the way you handle models, that's the same in Unreal as it is in Unity, as it is in other game engines. So if you've used Unreal a bit, you'll probably be a little bit more fluent in sort of game art jargon and sort of techniques all over the place, and so it will be easier to learn other game engines too. But maybe you'll have an Unreal job, and then you won't have to learn anything new, and that'll be awesome.
Yeah, it makes your life easier.
When I interviewed at PlayStation, they said do you know how to use Unreal? And I had used it for 1 hour in my life, and I was like, yeah, of course.
I know everything.
Yeah, and so when I started, they were like, all right, here's Unreal, and I just had to sort of learn it as I went, which ended up being fine. But what happened that was super crazy was after 8 months or so, the senior environment artist there got pregnant and moved to Chicago and left the team. And there was nobody else making level art who knew how to use Unreal except me. She was the only other one. So I became the only person who was putting game art into the game outside of characters. Yeah, and I was like, I've
been using this for a year.
Yeah, less than a year even, and I was like, all right, crap, But I watched a lot of YouTube videos, and it all worked out. But yeah, I guess my point is always be ready to learn stuff.
Yeah.
Always be curious, always be ready to Google some tutorials, because that's definitely going to happen. One time my boss was like, hey, can you rig a bike chain on this bike? And I was like, yeah, no problem. And internally I was like, I have no idea how to rig a bike chain. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But off to Google I go, how to rig a bike chain, and sure enough, there was videos and stuff, and we ended up finding 2 different ways to do it. One of them was too slow in the game, and one ended up working. So yeah, I think just being able to show that you're curious and can pick up different softwares is a really great skill to show.
For your portfolio that you I guess showed for getting the internship at Sony before you started working there full time, was that on ArtStation, or was that I
don't know if ArtStation was as popular then. It probably was, but I think at the time I showed them something on Portfolio Box, which I wouldn't recommend. I haven't enjoyed my time on Portfolio Box. Yeah, if it was now, I'd show my ArtStation. Yeah.
So yeah, for applying for stuff, do you just send them a link to your ArtStation, or?
I'm trying to remember. Usually they have like a place where you can link it. I guess maybe there's places that have like a place for a PDF portfolio, but generally I think they'd rather see. Usually what I see is like here's a place to upload your resume as a PDF, and then there's like a space for additional notes or something, and you paste a link to your ArtStation or your portfolio website. I just like ArtStation because it's fast and low maintenance.
Yeah, it's real nice.
Yeah,
But thanks, Daniel. This was
absolutely.
very informative. Do you have any demos or like tutorials that you recommend from anywhere?
Yes, I do. So actually, I have all my videos from the BFA class. It's something like 7 or 8
Yes.
hours of demos and feedback videos. So anybody's welcome to watch those. They're a bit slow and focused on the stuff we were doing in the BFA class. But the last video in that series is actually me talking about like where should you go online to find tutorials, which places have the best tutorials, or the best places to find reference information. So I can send you the link to that video, because it's basically a little 10-minute video about other videos and websites where you can get the best tutorials and stuff.
That would be fantastic, because then I can share that with everyone in the class.
Absolutely. I think my favorite one that I've discovered recently is this guy named Dynasty, Dinusty. And he's like, I think he works for Ubisoft or something. He's a really good game environment artist, and he just has this YouTube channel where he does portfolio reviews for people. And he's really clear, goes over some really good portfolios and some really not so good portfolios, and he gives really good feedback. And I've become addicted to just watching his like portfolio reviews. And he also does like demos and stuff. But that's a really good channel.
Huh, that's cool. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out, because I mean, if he's doing portfolio reviews, it'll be cool to see what he thinks of stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if he's a senior environment artist or just like a regular environment artist, but like he's definitely got those like game industry professional opinions. I think he worked on like The Division and stuff, so he knows.
Cool. Yeah.
He knows how to make nice looking stuff.
Yeah, that's a good game. It's really pretty.
Yeah.
Are you excited for any games to come out? Maybe the one that you've been working on?
I am excited for the one I'm working on to come out. That will be nice. I think, yeah. Right now, I'm excited for Ace Combat 7 because I'm a giant Ace Combat fan, and the last one of those came out 12 years ago, which has hurt my heart.
Like all the Kingdom Hearts fans?
Yeah, like exactly. It's like they put out 2 Ace Combat games in those 12 years that were like bad and not right. Like one was unrelated to any of the previous games, and then the other one was like a free-to-play online game, which had its own set of problems. So like this is the first one where they're just like, we're back on our bullshit. We're back making Ace Combat games the way you like. And I'm like absolutely on board for this. It was supposed to come out 2 years ago, and it got super delayed.
Oh damn! Yeah.
So I'm ready. It's coming out Friday.
Oh yes, so you're very ready.
I'm extremely ready.
It looks like a cool game. Is it? It's just like flying jets and blowing stuff up.
Yeah, it's like fighter jets, but it's super anime. Like,
oh yes,
like they have giant flying wings that are like aircraft carriers and launch like 1,000 fighters and like 1,000 missiles, and they say stuff like, this twisted game has to end. It's super great. It's like so melodramatic.
That's awesome. I love that anime. Like, it's time for everything.
Yeah, it's like fighter jets but anime.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's my main one. I think there's a lot of good games coming out this year, though.
Oh yes,
I am looking forward to
finally.
Oh yeah,
so excited.
And Kingdom Hearts 3. That's coming pretty soon.
I think that comes out this month.
I don't know anything about Kingdom Hearts. I played some of the first one, and I was like, this is crazy. It is fun. It's crazy, though.
Yeah.
I don't understand why Mickey Mouse is like a king of a castle.
Yeah, it's like
so,
Mickey
it's
Mouse
like,
is the king and all that.
It's like, whose idea was this game? I don't understand why it was made, but I'm glad it was.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, but yeah, This has been cool. You'll have to show me how everybody's models turn out.
Yeah, I'll send you screenshots. I'm probably gonna look at them right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and if anybody listening to this video ever wants like more feedback on models or whatever, I'm always my Facebook Messenger door is always open. Anybody's welcome to ask me what I think of stuff because I got opinions of everything.
Yes, and they're good opinions. Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, awesome.
Cool.
My pipe is slowly consumed into the ground.
It's getting eaten slowly.
There we go. Don't turn that. You don't know what will happen. You saw that in a video game?
That it's like, why is there just like a hole with a doorway into the ground? You just lift that up and just underground there's a giant, like, you know those like hidden underground bunkers people make?
Yes.
It's just like, why is this here? Opens to a giant bunker.
I seem to have broken the game, so this seems like a good place to
stop.
Finish this demo.
For sure. Well, thank you so much, Daniel.
This Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it was great. Good to have.
Alrighty. Talk to you later, man.
See you later. Bye.